shocking truth of Ranbir Singh, a story that changed everything. A 22-year-old lands his dream job and calls his parents to share the happiest news of his life. The next morning, his photo is on the front page, but not as a success story. It's a crime scene. What happened to Ranbir Singh, and why are the police smiling in the photo of his lifeless body? This isn't just a story of one life lost, it's a story that shook an entire system. Ranbir Singh's death exposed a horrifying truth about abuse of power and fake encounters. What really happened that day? And how did it lead to a case that changed everything? Stick around to uncover the shocking details. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring important stories like this to light. In this dark story, we'll explore a deeply troubling case that changed how police encounters are viewed in India. You see, whenever police officers are involved in shootouts, also called encounters, they must explain everything to the Human Rights Commission. This rule exists because sometimes police officers have misused their power to kill criminals for personal revenge. While some bad officers do get punished, this particular case was so shocking that it led to a complete stop of encounter killings in that state after 2009. The National Human Rights Commission of India found something very disturbing. Out of many encounters between 2009 and 2013, 555 were fake. Think about that number for a moment. During those years, people lived in fear of the police. Every other day, newspapers would carry stories about new encounters. In just one state, Uttar Pradesh, 138 fake encounters happened. This brings us to our main story about a young man named Ranbir Singh who lived in Shalimar Garden, Ghaziabad, Uttar Pradesh. Ranbir was just 22 in 2009. He was a bright young man who had finished his college degree and even earned his MBA. Like many fresh graduates, he was looking for his first job. He would often travel around for interviews, and his friends were helping him find good opportunities. One day, he got an exciting interview call from Dehradun, a beautiful city in the neighboring state of Uttarakhand. Ranbir and his family thought this was a great chance. The journey from his home to Dehradun was long, about 155 miles, taking nearly 5 hours by bus or other public transport. On July 3rd, 2009, Ranbir went for his interview. He did so well that the company wanted him to start working the very next day. They were really impressed by how well he could communicate, his knowledge, and his enthusiasm for the job. Overjoyed, Ranbir first called his parents with the good news, then shared it with his friend in Dehradun. Everyone was celebrating his success. But their happiness didn't last long. The next morning, on July 4th, 2009, they saw something horrible in the newspaper. The front page showed a story about Dehradun police killing a supposed gangster. The most shocking part was the photograph. It showed a young man's body lying in a forest, surrounded by about 15 police officers. Some of them were actually smiling for the picture. This kind of photo, police posing with a dead body, was usually only seen when they caught dangerous terrorists or notorious criminals like Pablo Escobar. But this time something was very wrong. The newspaper told a very different story that day. It claimed that a dangerous criminal had fought with a police officer, stolen his gun, and run away with 2 friends. While his friends escaped, the police said they cornered this criminal in a forest. According to their story, he shot at them first, so they called for backup. When more police arrived, they fired back and killed him. After it was over, they proudly reported their success to headquarters. Higher-ranking officers even praised the police team for their work. But when Ranbir's family saw this story and the photo, their world fell apart. The young man in that picture looked exactly like their son. Scared and desperate, Ranbir's father, Ranbir Singh, tried calling his son's phone. No answer. It was turned off. The family couldn't just sit and wait. They quickly left their home in Shalimar Garden and rushed to Dehradun. Their first stop was the Dalinwala police station, where this whole incident had been reported. At the station, they asked a terrible question. Where is the body of the person killed yesterday? The police sent them to the hospital. When they got there, they found out the doctors hadn't done the post-mortem yet. Then came the moment they had dreaded. They saw the body. Their worst fears came true. It was their Ranbir. The sight was horrible. There was blood all over his body. The police stuck to their story. Ranbir was a criminal who stole a gun, ran away, and shot at them. They claimed they only fired back to protect themselves. But Ranbir's parents knew the truth. Their son was just a good student who had finished his MBA in Ghaziabad. He had come to Dehradun for a job interview, nothing more. How could their gentle, educated son be a criminal? It made no sense. The family couldn't stay quiet. They gathered outside the hospital and started protesting, telling everyone who would listen that the police had killed an innocent young man. Their protest made the police nervous. Officers rushed to the hospital, trying to make the family leave and quiet down. But Ranbir's family stood their ground. They wouldn't be silenced. That's when things got worse. The police started hitting the protesters with batons. The local reporters watched everything unfold at the hospital. When they talked to Ranbir's family, they heard a completely different story, one about an innocent job seeker who was wrongly killed. It was ironic that these were the same reporters who had earlier taken smiling photos with the police after the encounter. The truth started coming out the very next morning. On July 5th, the newspapers that had praised the police just days ago now questioned their story. They wrote about how the police might have killed an innocent man and tried to cover it up. This news shook the entire state of Uttarakhand. Then came the biggest shock, the post-mortem report. What it revealed was horrifying. Ranbir had been shot not once or twice, but 22 times. His body had 28 different injuries. Many of his bones and ribs were broken. This report completely destroyed the police's story. Think about it. The police claimed Ranbir stole a gun, ran into the forest, and shot at them. But how could someone with broken bones and so many injuries run anywhere? The evidence pointed to something much darker. Ranbir had likely been in police custody, where he was brutally beaten before being killed. The injuries told their own story. A person so badly hurt couldn't possibly have done what the police claimed. They said he grabbed an officer's gun and ran away, but with broken bones? It just didn't make sense. Ranbir's father, Ravindra, tried to fight for justice. He wanted to file a case against the police officers, but no one would register it. However, by now, the case had gotten too big to ignore. The Uttarakhand state government had to step in. They called for India's top investigative agency, the CBI, to look into what really happened. The CBI began their investigation on July 31st, 2009. When they questioned the police officers, they all stuck to the same story. Ranbir stole their gun, ran away, shot at them, and they had to shoot back. They even tried to paint Ranbir as a gangster who extorted money from rich people in Dehradun. But their story had too many holes. The evidence told a different tale, one of police brutality and a cover-up. The real question wasn't whether Ranbir was innocent anymore, but how deep this conspiracy went. The CBI's investigation started picking apart the police's story piece by piece. First, they checked Ranbir's phone, no calls about extortion or anything criminal. Then they visited the company where Ranbir had interviewed. The staff confirmed everything. Ranbir had impressed them so much they wanted him to start work the very next day. Then came a huge break in the case. The gun the police claimed Ranbir used, it wasn't even a police weapon, but a cheap, locally made gun. And here's the kicker, it hadn't been fired at all. Even more telling were the photos from the supposed chase and shootout. In a real gun battle where someone is shot 22 times, you'd expect to see police officers with torn clothes, scratches, or at least looking tired and dusty. But in these photos, every officer looked fresh and clean. The CBI spent 6 months gathering evidence and talking to witnesses. By December 2009, they had enough proof to charge 18 police officers for Ranbir's death. What they uncovered was very different from the police's story. Here's what really happened. Ranbir was just a regular young man from a good family. On July 2nd, he left his home in Ghaziabad for Dehradun, a 5-hour journey, to interview for a job he really wanted. He stayed at his friend Ram Kumar's house that night. The next morning, July 3rd, Ranbir went to his interview. He did great, so great that they wanted him to start the very next day. Excited about his success, Ranbir wanted to celebrate. He called another friend in Dehradun named Ashok and said, "Hey, I got the job. Ram Kumar and I are coming over to celebrate together." Ranbir and Ram Kumar hopped on Ram Kumar's motorcycle and headed to Ashok's house. They took Mohini Road, and this is where timing changed everything. That same day, India's former president Pratibha Patil was visiting Dehradun. She had landed at Jolly Grant Airport and was heading to Mussoorie. Everything changed because of one important visitor. Former President Pratibha Patil was traveling from Jolly Grant Airport to Mussoorie, about 38 miles away. Since Mussoorie had no airport, she had to go by road. Her convoy was supposed to pass through Mohini Road around noon. Sub-Inspector G.D. Bhatt was in charge of security that day. He and his team had blocked off Mohini Road completely. No one was allowed through. But Ranbir and Ram Kumar didn't know this. They were just trying to get to their friend Ashok's house, which happened to be near Mohini Road. When they reached the roadblock, Ranbir politely asked if they could pass, explaining they were just going nearby. But the officer wasn't interested in explanations. Instead, he shouted abuse at them and started hitting Ram Kumar's motorcycle with his baton. This made Ranbir angry, not just because of the disrespect, but because the officer was damaging his friend's bike. Ranbir spoke up against this unfair treatment. That's when Sub-Inspector G.D. Bhatt came over. What started as an argument turned into a physical fight. Several officers grabbed Ranbir, but Ram Kumar managed to run away. Bhatt ordered his men to take Ranbir to the police station. Bhatt was especially angry because Ranbir had slapped him during the scuffle. At the station, Bhatt and other officers beat Ranbir badly. They demanded to know where Ram Kumar lived, and Ranbir, terrified, told them. The police took the badly beaten Ranbir to Ram Kumar's flat, but it was locked. The neighbors watched in horror as they saw how badly hurt Ranbir was. Not finding Ram Kumar made Bhatt even angrier, and he beat Ranbir even more. That's when things got really serious. The officers realized they'd gone too far. Ranbir was so badly hurt he might die. They knew if he died in the police station, they'd all be in huge trouble. Some might lose their jobs, others might go to jail. So they came up with a plan, the plan that would become the fake encounter story. In a quiet corner of Dehradun, a series of police calls started something that would later expose a dark truth. Picture this. A police officer's voice crackles over the radio to the control room. He tells a story about a dangerous man who just grabbed Officer G.D. Bhatt's gun on Mohini Road and ran into the forest. The police claim they're chasing him. Time ticks by and another call comes in. This time, the officers paint a scene of a desperate criminal hiding among the trees, shooting at them. "We need backup," they cry into their radios. Without hesitation, more police officers rush to the forest, ready to help their fellow officers. Then comes the final call, the one that changes everything. The police report that they had no choice but to shoot back when the supposed gangster fired at them. They announce his death in what they call a shootout. But here's the twist. These 3 calls weren't telling the truth. They were carefully planned, like scenes in a movie, to cover up something much worse. You see, the police knew something important. Every call to the control room gets recorded with exact times. They used this knowledge to create fake proof of a chase that never happened. After killing Ranbir Singh, they took photos of his body and placed a gun next to him, a gun they brought themselves. To make their story even bigger, they told reporters something shocking. This gangster might have been planning to kill the president of India. That's why, they claimed, he desperately grabbed the police gun and ran. They said if they hadn't stopped him, something terrible could have happened. But when the CBI, Central Bureau of Investigation, started looking into what really happened, they found mistakes in the police's story. Big mistakes. First, the police had called Ranbir a gangster without even checking his background. When the CBI looked into Ranbir's life, they found something surprising. He had never been in trouble with the law, not even once. This made them wonder, how could someone be a dangerous criminal without any criminal record? The real story of Ranbir Singh started to come out. He had traveled to Dehradun on July 2nd, staying at his friend Ram Kumar's place. The next morning, he went to a job interview, something that seems very ungangster-like. The company even confirmed that, yes, Ranbir had been there for the interview. Then came another hole in the police's story. They said Ranbir stole Officer Bhatt's service revolver, but when they showed Ranbir's bag and photos after his death, it had a different gun inside, a locally made illegal pistol, not a police officer's revolver. Yet the police stuck to their story about the stolen service revolver. The police's third big mistake came from not keeping their story straight. During questioning, they kept talking about chasing Ranbir into the forest after he took the service revolver. But their story had so many contradictions that it started falling apart like a house of cards. When you look at everything together, the carefully timed calls, the planted evidence, the made-up story about the president, and all the mistakes in their tale, it becomes clear that this wasn't a chance encounter or a police chase gone wrong. It was something much more sinister. A planned killing made to look like a necessary police action. This part of the story shows us how important it is to question official stories and how even carefully planned cover-ups can fall apart when someone looks closely enough at the details. It's a reminder that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of coming to the surface. The truth started unraveling like threads from a worn sweater. The police stuck to their story. They said they shot Ranbir because he fired at them first, but when the CBI talked to people living near Ramkumar's house, they heard something very different. These neighbors had seen Ranbir alive in police handcuffs at the exact time the police claimed he was running away and shooting at them. This created a huge problem in the police's story. How could someone be in two places at once? What made things even stranger was that no police officer ever mentioned Ranbir escaping from their custody. They never tried to explain how he went from being handcuffed to running free in the forest. But the biggest shock came on July 5th when doctors released Ranbir's post-mortem report. The report asked a chilling question that couldn't be ignored. If this was just a simple shootout, why did Ranbir's body have 28 different injuries? The evidence painted a darker picture. It looked like the police had caught Ranbir, beaten him badly, and then, realizing he might die from his injuries, created a fake shootout to cover their tracks. The ballistics report, which shows how bullets travel and hit things, told an even more disturbing story. Out of 22 bullets that hit Ranbir's body, many went straight through him and into nearby trees, while others fell right to the ground. This meant something important. The police must have shot him from very close up. In real shootouts, people usually fire from far away, trying to stay safe from each other's bullets. When putting together their case, the CBI carefully noted these 4 major mistakes the Dehradun police made that day. At first, the case was going to be tried in a Dehradun court, but Ranbir's family worried they wouldn't get a fair trial in Uttarakhand. After all, the accused were local police officers with lots of connections. They wanted the case moved to Delhi, far from local influence. Ranbir's parents took their concerns all the way to India's Supreme Court, the highest court in the land. The Supreme Court listened and agreed the case would be moved to Delhi. The CBI had started looking into everything on July 31st, 2009, and what they found was serious enough to charge 18 police officers with the crime. On June 6th, 2014, justice finally came. In a historic decision, the CBI's special court gave all 18 police officers life sentences. They would spend the rest of their lives in prison. The judge made it very clear these weren't just any criminals, these were police officers who were supposed to protect people. Instead, because of some personal fight, they killed an innocent student in such a terrible way that only life in prison could match their crime. This case made history in India. Never before had so many police officers been sent to prison for life all at once. But the story wasn't over yet. The police officers didn't accept their punishment quietly. They challenged the court's decision in the Delhi High Court, hoping to get lighter sentences or be found innocent. For 4 long years, the case wound its way through the Delhi High Court. Ranbir's family waited anxiously to see if justice would hold. Finally, on February 6, 2018, the Delhi High Court was ready to give its final decision. The whole country watched, wondering what would happen to these 18 police officers who had betrayed their duty in such a shocking way. The Delhi High Court finally came to a decision that changed many lives. 7 police officers would stay in prison for life, but 10 others were set free. One officer got just 2 years in prison, which he had already served while waiting for the trial. The court explained their decision simply. They had solid proof against 7 officers, but not enough evidence against the others. Among those 7 officers spending life in prison was Inspector S.K. Yeswal, who was in charge of the police station. With him were Sub-Inspector G.D. Bhatt and officers Ajit Singh, Nitin Chauhan, Rayesh Bish, Neeraj Yadav, and 2 others. But Ranbir's family felt justice wasn't complete. They took their fight to India's highest court, the Supreme Court. Ranbir's father, Ranbir Singh, spoke from his heart when he said, "The Delhi High Court didn't give us justice. My son was shot 22 times and had 28 wounds on his body. Anyone who kills someone this brutally shouldn't go free." The case continues in the Supreme Court today, and only time will show what happens next. But something good did come from this tragic story. Since 2009, there hasn't been a single police encounter killing in Uttarakhand. The case changed things in ways nobody expected. The CBI deserves credit for their brave work. It's not easy to investigate police officers, but they followed every clue and listened to every witness until they found the truth. Even when Ranbir's friends, Ram Kumar and Ashok, changed their stories in court, it didn't hurt the case much. And why? Because the neighbors who saw the police taking Ranbir to Ram Kumar's flat never changed their story. They told the truth in court, just as they had from the beginning. Plus, the medical report showing Ranbir's injuries told a story that couldn't be denied. Looking at all the evidence, the witness statements, the medical reports, and everything else, the CBI Special Court made its historic decision to send all 18 police officers to prison for life. Though some were later released, this case changed Indian history and showed that nobody is above the law. The story of Ranbir Singh reminds us that justice might take time, but the truth has a way of coming out. It shows us how important it is to keep fighting for what's right, even when it seems impossible. Most importantly, it proves that one person's story can change an entire system and make sure similar tragedies don't happen again. This case will be remembered not just for what happened to Ranbir, but for how it changed the way police operate in Uttarakhand. It stands as a powerful reminder that those who are meant to protect us must follow the same laws they enforce.